Not only is it important from the climbing community's perspective, but from a historical perspective, to know that the correct people are credited with the first ascent of the mountain. And the people are Stuck, Karstens, Harper, and Tatum.
All through my life, my family's just been, your great granduncle, he was the first person to set foot on Mount McKinley. Isn't that cool? And I never really thought a whole lot about it. I'm like, that's pretty amazing. But, at that time, great granduncle may as well have been a million years ago when I was younger. But it was definitely interesting. I've known about it for a long time. Did a book report on it in high school.
I was somehow always reminded by my mother, and she would do this the Indian way. She wouldn't say, "You naughty girl, you should be studying right now." She'd never say that. She would just somehow bring up a story about Walter Harper. Isn't he wonderful? He was the first to climb Mount McKinley. You remember that?
Well, yeah, I guess we knew Walter Harper climbed the mountain, but there wasn't a lot of talk about it. And in a way, I kind of attribute that to the Athabascan culture, the Indian culture, where I think we were kind of raised to make a lot of splash about stuff and don't be loud and bragging. And
we were just sitting around, and in characteristic modest fashion, my dad. I was married and had children, so I had to have been in my 30s. And I had never, nor did any of my siblings know that that his father's brother was Robert Tatum and had summited Denali. I said, "Are you kidding me?" And they said no. And then, I remember Dad commenting on how Robert was a very humble, kind of person, and was they just never thought to turn around and brag about it.
My grandfather's climbing pick, his ice axe. This is the axe that you can find described by Hudson Stuck in the Ascent of Denali. They made 5 of them, and only one survives. So that was entrusted to me. It went up on my wall over one of those classic Sierra Club posters that maybe you've seen 5 people in a row walking up a razor ridge, and that pick just looked great over that, right above a kid's bed. And that was always a symbol of, you've got something to live up to, kid.
I was lucky because I had this history in my family, because in my head, I can close my eyes and I can see it all. I can see the snow, I can see the black spruce, I can see the mountain, I can see, and I know, and I know if you live in Alaska, the land shapes you. It does, it really does. And so in my mind, it gave me an appreciation of Alaska, because they learned how to live in connection to a very harsh climate.
For Harry's part, he was self-educated. He ran away from home at 17. Unlike a lot of other sourdough pioneers, when you wanted to find Harry Karstens in Fairbanks, you didn't go to a saloon. You went to Hall's bookstore. And so his journals are fairly spare. And I think they're more the traditional outdoorsman's journal of what the weather was that day, what we did that day, and everything very matter of fact. You see that a lot in trapper journals.
He was stern, he was stoic. He knew what he wanted and how to go about getting it. He liked going into new places and figuring out how to do new things. And I think this is distinctly American.
Stuck was a Victorian romantic. He knew that one of the tests for proof of an expedition was the quality of the narrative. And I think he tried to lay out a very good narrative of the expedition as part of his 3 proofs of what they actually did, so that there would be no doubt to anyone that they actually succeeded.
Stuck was one of the, what would be the word? A major significant figure that people should know more about. He was a strong proponent of Alaska Native language and culture. Strongly. Fiercely against moves to anything that would threaten that. Stuck would have had a fit at these things that talk about declaring English to be the official language of the state of Alaska. He would have had a fit with it.
Walter Harper's was very formal, somewhat stilted language, and I think that's because he was a student and he was trying to write in the manner he was taught by his mentor, Hudson Stuck.
You know, there are several Hudson Stuck books, and Walter was part of a lot of that. So he did a lot of walking, dog mushing with Hudson Stuck, and they probably got used to each other. Hudson Stuck is known for having kind of looked for certain qualities in boys in their boarding school.
I think it was just another job to him at the time. But this is, well, we're going to climb this great mountain, and I'm not sure he knew that his father was, or they attribute that Arthur Harper being the first pilgrim to name this or see this mountain and make a big to-do about it. And only years later to have his youngest son be part of the team to scramble up there. So.
John Fredson is the one who lived long enough, so that quality he might have been looking for came through with John Fredson, becoming the leader and just accomplishing an amazing amount of things in his short life.
The one that was the most enlightening and had the most interesting detail, I thought, was Tatum's. And all of his is almost a diary entry rather than a journal. It's, you know, he's homesick, he misses this person and that person, and he wakes up at night from a bad dream, and he puts that in his journal, and he writes about how hard the trip is for him, and that one is one of the keys to understanding the whole expedition. They were there way longer than they wanted. They encountered a shattered ridge that expeditions before them had surmounted in one case a day, in another case 5 to 6 days, their case almost 3 weeks to get up. The power of perseverance. And then the other one is the power of desire. Hudson Stuck was a frail, weak man who was not qualified to lead an expedition. We know that. Yet just the power of his desire to get to the top propelled him up there with the help of his companions. Desire and perseverance. Those are the physical, practical lessons to learn from it or take away from it.
Harry's legacy lays within sight of Mount McKinley. What he has given us is the nature of a national park, the kind of park that it is, a wilderness park with limited access. It's by his nature, his strength, his abilities that it is what it is.
I get to pass it on to my children and now my grandchildren, and now we're trying to share it with other young people, because I think, you know, he was 16 and Walter Harper was 21. They were young men, and they did this amazing thing. And you know, and I think that there are so many things that people know about what's wrong with Alaska Natives, but they rarely know what was right. And there's resiliency there, there's strength there, and so I think that that's what he left resiliency, strength, stories that it was actually done. So if I could make contact with that, I hope other people can.
It's a shame. I never took the time to sit down with Dad. Dad's passed away, and really find out about him. And so he spent some time with Uncle Robert and had, high regard for him, and just said he was a very modest, quiet-spoken gentleman. And everybody thought highly of him, but that he would be the last guy in the world to let you know what he had done.
The church in Fort Yukon has moved now from where it was when he was there. But if you walk through that church, as this church, you get a sense of the history and the strength and the power that's there in that community with the Cochin people and in that church. And they say his ghost still walks around up there in that place. Just keeping an eye on things. And that wouldn't surprise me a bit.
The climb, a short few months, can't overshadow the fact that he did all these other good things with Hudson Stuck and opening up Alaska in a way, and certainly helping educate and the health conditions of people in the villages way back when. So it was more than climbing the mountain, being the first up, but of course that's what people are going to remember him about.
I think one of the big reasons why this story is not more widely told is it seems, from my perspective at least, a lot of the mountains that have been conquered are of people of status in one way or another, be it political or religious or whatever. So they come back to the people and they talk of their great conquests, and I really feel like this one was he got back and kind of got back to day-to-day life and didn't want to brag about it. So I think being extraordinary and being humble about it, I think to me is what the legacy is.
We talked to one particular group of board members. There were about 12 to 15 Native people from different villages in the state. And just telling the story of Walter Harper, granted most of them were elders, but that was the legacy that I have to say. They wanted to see not just the picture and hear the story of Walter Harper. They wanted to see the picture of and hear the story of Dana Wright, who's going to be climbing in his name. It's the continuity of a legacy. I think that's really what I saw in those faces. They are the elders who are going back to their own communities. They want to be able to say, and we keep on doing this.